You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner has filed a federal lawsuit using the Ku Klux Klan Act, alleging a civil rights conspiracy by the city of St. Louis, the St. Louis Police Officers Association, the police union spokesman, Jeffrey Rorter, retired police officer Charles Lane, special prosecutor Gerard Carmody, and his children. Yo. Now, of course, since Kim Gardner became the DA there, folks have been, they've been trying to undermine her, literally trying to strip her of her authority. She's been under attack. Now, understand, you got two different things happening here. You have a St. Louis DA and a St. Louis County DA. Wesley Bell became the St. Louis County DA. But let me tell you what happened with that. When this Wesley Bell won, all of a sudden, y'all ready for this? All of the DAs, and remember, the longtime district attorney was the one who refused to prosecute the officer who shot and killed Mike Brown. He was a DA there for 2 decades, all right? Bell becomes the new DA. The DAs who work in the office, they, y'all, I can't say this. They decide to unionize. They don't join just any union. They join the police union. So now all of a sudden in St. Louis, you now have 2 black DAs, and now the power structure in St. Louis has been moving against them to thwart them from doing their jobs. Mustafa, this is the stuff that people need to quite understand. Black folks get into power. Whites have controlled it for a long time in St. Louis. All of a sudden now, 2 African Americans who are sitting in the chief law enforcement position in St. Louis City, St. Louis County. And they're like, oh, hell no, we're going to stop y'all from doing your job.
It's amazing some of the stuff that's going on in St. Louis. And for them to actually make the moves that they are. I mean, I think it's about $3 million that the police have had to pay out because of racist behavior and activities and those types of things. So you've got these folks who've come in who are trying to clean things up. They're trying to put some spotlight on these injustices that are happening. And of course, then they, as the light hits them, you know, I hate to say it like this, but the roaches run and they start to move into, you know, these unions and other types of vehicles to protect themselves. And we got to pay particular attention. And that's why we can't stop with our votes with 1 or 2 folks being focused on them and helping them to get into positions. We have to surround them with others who can actually help them to make the reforms that are necessary.
Here's what she says in her suit. The Ku Klux Klan Act was adopted to address precisely this scenario, a racially motivated conspiracy to deny the civil rights of racial minorities by obstructing a government official's efforts to ensure equal justice under law for all. The stakes are high. This case cries out for federal enforcement. This is also, of course, the same, Pam, the same woman who has been trying to get Lamar Johnson free. Her office went through the whole deal, determined that Lamar Johnson did not commit this act. She's been blocked by the state attorney general, the Republican Eric Greitens, by saying, oh, you don't have the authority for this. And so and she has been literally in a battle since day one in her job.
Well, let's get clear about what the historic paradigm of prosecuting was.
And sorry, Eric Greitens is was then governor. Sorry,
right.
Go ahead.
Right, that paradigm was that law enforcement was policing black people and prosecutors' job was to prosecute them and put them in jail. But that's not the way the law is really set up. That's not what the Constitution stands for. The Constitution stands for the notion that all crime is crime, no matter who commits it. And a prosecutor is supposed to prosecute all crimes, those committed by black people, white people, or anybody else, including those committed by people in power and by law enforcement. And now we have put people into positions of as prosecutors, as DA. Look at that fabulous sister Tish James out in New York, who are now saying that I'm going to enforce the law in a colorblind way. I'm going to enforce violations by black people and white people and the white people who police black people. And that is the paradigm shift that is causing these DAs to now say, oh, we have to unionize. That's a reaction because they fear that their actions are now going to be scrutinized in a way they weren't in the past. But that is the reality, is that as we as a community exercise our voting power, we can put people into positions where they make a true difference in how justice is implemented, not just how it's written. And that is why Brother Ali's point was so important. It's not just about voting top of the ticket. It's not just about voting in presidential cycles. Every one of these down ticket races matters, from the PTA to the DA to the Senate of the USA.
Here's what's interesting, Erica. In her lawsuit, she literally lays out 122 different points of laying out history, racial animus, how she's being targeted there in St. Louis by various powers. And not only that, what she also says in her lawsuit, when she talks about how she is being prevented from doing her job. Go to my iPad, please. She says, sadly, the city of St. Louis has a long history of racial inequality and prejudice in its criminal justice system generally and within its police force particularly. It is no slight to the dedication of hundreds of thousands of fine police officers nationwide to note that there are far too many tragic cases of lawless police misconduct with far too little accountability. Residents of St. Louis have known this brand of suffering more intimately than most in recent years. Gardner was elected in 2016 on a promise to redress the scourge of historical inequality and rebuild trust in the criminal justice system among communities of color. Unfortunately, entrenched interests in St. Louis, including defendants, have mobilized to thwart these efforts through a broad campaign of collusive conduct, including the unprecedented appointment of an ethically conflicted special prosecutor to investigate the activities of Gardner's office and a patently overbroad and unconstitutional ransacking of the office's electronic files. The defendants leveraged their control of the special prosecutor's office to set up many of the trappings of a legitimate criminal investigation, complete with subpoenas and a grand jury. But the true purpose of defendants' conduct is not to charge Gardner with any crime because they know that she has not committed any. Rather, it is to thwart and impede her efforts to establish equal treatment under law for all St. Louis citizens at every turn, to remove her from the position to which she was duly elected by any means necessary, and perhaps to show her successor what happens to circuit attorneys who dare to stand up for the equal rights of racial minorities in St. Louis.
Jesus. And you're talking about an act that is 149 years old, almost 150 years old, that's being employed for her protections.
She actually put it in here, second line. When Congress debated the Ku Klux Klan Act in 1871, its House sponsor, Representative Samuel Schellenberger of Ohio, explained that the legislation's purpose was, quote, the prevention of deprivations which shall attack the equality of rights of American citizens. So it's interesting that for her to use a law dating back to the Reconstruction period.
Right.
Similar to Byron Allen's lawsuit against Comcast.
Yep.
And so she's hitting them with a law from 1871.
Absolutely right. Which is, I agree with both of you all. That is why, and you talk about this all the time, Roland, we have to connect the dots and pay attention. This is the William Barr agenda on steroids, because you have a circuit attorney who is responsible for prosecuting state-level crimes, and so she does have a progressive agenda. In 2018, the case that really set this off was, you brought up the former governor who had an affair and was supposedly had taken a semi-nude photo of a woman.
President.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But here's where I got a problem with the 15% of African-American men that are calling themselves being pro-Trump. Here we go, brothers. So pro-Trump, but this white former governor who was supposedly a Republican shining star was permitted to not be impeached, but to resign from office, to return to the Navy, Pam, as an active duty person. He was a Navy SEAL, could not continue to be a Navy SEAL, but kept his trident. He was not prosecuted under Uniform Code of Military Justice, the UCMJ, was not court-martialed. We know in the military there are all type of cases. It's gone up 12% of women and men who are victims of sexual assault in the military. That has gone up. He is entered. Taxpayers are paying his salary, are paying for his health care. He has essentially left with no stain on his record. But you have a black state's attorney person who is, for the past few years, has continued to face all types of backlash from not just the city, but then we're talking about the police force, we're talking about the union as well. There is no commonality when we're talking about justice. It is for one specific group. And so, again, when you talk about all of those down ballot races, the onus is on all of us to know who those individuals are that are running. And when we see black people that are running for these state level office, circuit attorneys, DA, that we do check out who they are, but that we do vote for them, because these are the people that are with progressive agendas saying that they are trying their damnedest to ensure that there is equity within the law. And she is paying the price. Thank God for Marilyn Mosby and all those other black attorney generals, district attorneys that are standing with her. But as an elected official, the people that voted her into office should be standing with her as well.
Pam, listen to this here. This is what she puts in the lawsuit. An important original purpose of Section 1985 was to allow for federal judicial enforcement of the 14th Amendment to curb conspiracies of white citizens who sought to interfere with state authorities' efforts to expand racial justice and equality in the former Confederacy.
So, Roland, you just hit on such a critical component and something that people need to understand about our current politics, which is why every time black people hear states' rights, that's what they were talking about. The whole concept was that you needed the collective force of the federal government, which brought in progressive voices, West Coast, East Coast, North, South, and didn't allow the Southern thinking to dominate. And they came in and corrected and stymied and held back these attempts by Southern, old Southern, South will rise again people to completely undermine the political power in states that had large African-American populations, right? That's what this was all about. But the vestige of all of that, the consequence of all of that is that a core component of a certain kind of thinking on the right is that even though the law says all ballots count the same when they're counted in an election, when those ballots end up giving power to a person of color, they start finding reasons to take power from that office, right? Because that's what they did with Tony Evers and Mandela in Wisconsin. That's what they're, so when a person of color...
the exact same thing happened when Harold Washington became mayor of Chicago, when the, I think it was the Verdoliak 7 or whatever the number was, or 31, whatever the group of aldermen, they did everything to limit his influence, limit his power, because they were like, how dare this black man become mayor of Chicago?
Exactly. And that is something that we see as a core component of GOP thinking, not just in terms of removing power from offices once they become progressive or democratic or whatever. We see it all over the place.
But it's also they do their own that way.
Well, if they don't like what they elect.
When Michael Steele became chairman
of
the Republican National Committee, they tried to, because Steele told me, they tried to pass a rule that said any spending over $5,000 still had to get the approval of the committee. He goes, wait a minute, what the hell are you talking about? In fact, not only that, beyond the spending, he got called to Capitol Hill. Boehner, all those guys, they're in a meeting. They basically told him, you just stick to the party stuff, stay out of politics. He said, wait a minute. So other RNC chairs can talk about public policy and what's happening in the country, but I can't. And that's why when they had their convention, when they had their convention in Tampa, they had a luncheon honoring all former Republican National Committee chairs, did not invite him, did not include him. And not only that, Reince Priebus, when he became chair, did not even give Michael Steele credentials to attend the Republican National Committee. His credentials came through MSN. It was like either through MSNBC or CNN.
MSNBC.
That's how he attended the convention. So understand what you're dealing with here. And again, whether you're dealing historically with Democrats or Republicans, individuals who are in power, all of a sudden they see the tide shifting. And this is what I keep trying to explain to people. And last night, I want to thank the folks in Newark, Mayor Baraka, for the MLK event last night. More than 1,000 folks there jam-packed. But in my speech, I told them, you have to understand what's going on with this campaign. There's a reason why they're trying to pack the federal courts with judges who are 35 to 45. Nearly 90% of all of the federal judges Trump has appointed, McConnell has had confirmed, are white men. They want to stack the deck so they can control the courts. Now, again, I need y'all to listen to me. Kim Gardner filed a federal lawsuit. She says right here that Section 1985 allows for federal oversight. That means that if Trump is able to pack the federal bench with far right-wing white male judges, if more future black DAs file similar lawsuits, it's likely going to go before a federal judge who is one of those far right-wing white male judges who is more likely to rule against a Kim Gardner than a for Kim Gardner.
Right.
That's how you connect the dots to how the election of a black woman as DA and black folks sitting your asses at home and leading to a Trump gets elected impacts you, because that far right-wing white male judge could say no to a Kim Gardner, and if that judge says no and she appeals the case to the appellate and they are stacked with far right-wing white male Trump-appointed McConnell-confirmed judges, they gonna say no, and then it goes from there to the next level, and then the Supreme Court could say, we're not even gonna take it up, so therefore it stands. That's the connection between a local black DA and who gets elected president.
Right, absolutely. And you can't skip the part
if
that
this was church, they would say, "Preach, Pastor."
Preach, yes.
Go ahead, kid. Go ahead, Pam. Go ahead.
I mean, you can't avoid the connection of the dots where these are state legislatures that are making these decisions. These are state actors that are making these decisions. And what's fascinating is that at the state level, especially in states like Alabama and Mississippi and South Carolina, there are so many black people that you could have 2, 3, 4 times the kind of representation in the state legislature that we have. But what we also have is such a thoughtful, sophisticated, and well-developed voter suppression machine in those states that even black folks don't know all that is done to suppress the vote. So, you know, I tell people regularly, Roland, that the single most important protector of your vote is you. You've got to decide that you are going to pursue and exercise your power with the same vigor that you're going to pursue anything else in your life, right? Because it does affect all aspects of your life, and not just your life, but the life of anybody you claim to care about. So, if you call yourself a patriot, if you call yourself a member of the black community, God, if you call yourself a Christian, then you have to take steps to ensure that your values and the fairness and the justice that you believe in is actually executed. And, you know, I always tell people power is like Instagram. If you don't use it, nobody's gonna care about you. You've got to use your power. Not only do elected officials respond to the people who vote, but donors respond to the people who vote, right? All kinds of decisions are made only on the behest of the people who show up to vote. No candidate is worried about the opinions of the people who don't vote.
No, but Trump did thank black people for not voting.
He did.
Yes, he did.
He did.
Specifically.
He did.
So, folks, we'll keep you updated on what happens with the Kim Gardner case. You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.